It was one thing to be good in clown college. It's a whole nother thing to be good on the road. You got a contract. Now you're going to go work for one of the biggest live entertainment companies in the world. And you're going to be one small peg in this whole big puzzle of acrobats and jugglers and lion tamers and dancers and all these other elements. And you're going to have to live on a train with all these people. And you're going to go to work with these people. And then if you don't get along with them, guess what? You're going to home with these people.
Graduating with the class of 1985, Greg DeSanto became part of the legacy of the famed Ringling Brothers and Barnum & Bailey Clown College.
It was the first real exposure to clowning was Clown College, formal exposure. Ringling trained, they trained 1,297 people in 30 years.
Over these same 3 decades, Greg DeSanto has clowned professionally on Ringling Brothers, Big Apple, and numerous other shows. He's also trained and mentored a host of clowning hopefuls. Today, DeSanto is Executive Director of the International Clown Hall of Fame in Baraboo, Wisconsin. Deep down, though, DeSanto remains true to his personal calling.
I want to be the clown that works and gets laughs and affects people and just I get to say that I'm a clown. I'm a circus clown.
Highly esteemed within his own profession, DeSanto is a frequent speaker at gatherings of circus aficionados, like this one in Connecticut in 2017. Following his animated off-the-cuff presentation before circus fans, he devoted almost 2 hours to a freewheeling interview. Right off the bat, Greg gave this note of caution to wannabes.
You want to be a clown. I think clowns are born. I don't think clowns are made. I think you're born a clown. I think you can develop technique. I think you can develop skills, have a skill set. But I think ultimately you either have it or you don't. And I've never met a successful clown that wasn't just innately funny. Before even the makeup or any of the external elements were added, that's all great and certainly an iconic part of the profession, but it's not necessary. Some of the greatest clowns in the world didn't have a red nose. Buster Keaton and Laurel and Hardy and the Three Stooges and so many, Jackie Gleason, Lucille Ball. They were clowns. It was a style of performance. Ultimately, your destination is you're born a clown and you just have to follow that path and get the training, because I think even if you are innately funny, I think in order to be, there's a big gap from being funny and being a professional performer. So I think that's a big part of learning the craft of the clown. The word clown to some people, especially in America, United States, I think is maybe slightly more negative or derogatory, maybe in some sense of the word, because there are a lot of bad clowns, whereas comedians, there's certainly bad comedians, but like any kind of comedy, it's if you're doing it, you have an instant critic. They said, I think it was Jackie Gleason who said, comedy gives you an instant critic. You go out there, you do something, and they laugh or they don't. With doing dramatic pieces or performing, other way, you're a singer, you're trying to evoke an emotion over a longer period of time, and you have an entire show to get to that point. But clowns, you go out, you do a bit, and they laugh or they don't. And so you either succeed or you fail right then and there. Lou Jacobs used to say, we used to ask, well, how do you know if the gag is funny? Well, did the audience laugh? So if the audience laughed, it worked.
Ringling Brothers impresario Irving Feld and his son Kenneth purposed Clown College to train and provide a continuing stream of younger mirth makers into an aging clown alley on the greatest show on earth.
Clown College was this program that was basically self-perpetuating. So every year they took 50 students. So every year, essentially, you had 50 people looking for your job. So it kind of negated your negotiating power. because you could go in there and go, well, I need $100 more a week. And I'm like, I got 49 other people down there that are willing to come on for less than you. And so you're not getting any more money. Now, you might be a good clown, and maybe you do have to, you have to obviously bring something to the table. Why do you want this much money? I mean, why do you need more money? Are you producing material? What value do you bring to the show? The fact that you're just going to be here another year doesn't warrant an extra, other than the raise that we're going to offer you. Because and they certainly appreciated good clowns. I think that the Felds were very cognizant about, they wanted to have good clowns on the show, but they also knew it's a business, and they're running this program. Before Clown College, I think clowns like Lou Jacobs, they learned from the clowns before them. And it wasn't easy. I remember hearing stories of Lou and Dwayne Thorpe, and Mark Anthony. They had to serve an apprenticeship, and they weren't accepted necessarily right away. So you kind of had to prove yourself, and it was a much harder time to be on the circus. Physically, obviously the train was not air conditioned, and they took a bath in a bucket, and they ate at a cookhouse, and we don't even go about the bathroom. I don't know what they did for that, but it was not a very comfortable life. So I always figured you had to really want to do this. So I think they learned, Lou used to say, well, I remember working with Polidor, who was a very famous clown, who learned from Marceline, who Chaplin used to be influenced by Marceline. So I think it was a part of a tradition that got passed down. Clown College made it a lot easier, especially by people like Otto Griebling and Lou Jacobs, who at the very beginning of Clown College realized that this is the salvation of professional clowning in America, because by 1967, when Irvin Feld bought the Ringling Show, the youngest clown in the alley was Mark Anthony, and he was 53 years old. The oldest clown was Paul Wenzel, Professor Paul Wenzel, and he was 88. So there were 14 clowns. It was dying off. The youngest clown was 53 years old. So I think Clown College started initially as a publicity gimmick for the new owners of the circus, which were the Felds, but then it actually served a purpose. So, the first year they had 26 clowns, potential students. They were all men. They were in ages from 17 to 53, and they all got offered contracts because they were creating a second unit of Ringling. So they had the red and the blue. So Irvin needed bodies. And so he says, well, this is a publicity gimmick. We'll have this clown training. They didn't call it Clown College. The first year was called the College of Clowns. And it was run by Mel Miller, who was the original dean, assisted by Danny Chapman, who was an old-time clown. Pat Valdo was still involved with Ringling in 1967, 68. And then Otto Griebling and Lou Jacobs came down. They took them off the road to come down and sort of give some impromptu instruction. So they were very supportive of it, because they realized that this is the only thing that's going to save this is by getting younger people, and younger being anywhere from 17 to 53. They all got jobs on the show. Now, some of them didn't stay very long, but by the second year, that's when they brought in Bill Ballantine. Bill Ballantine gave the Clown College a structure, and he gave it a formula, and he based it on, this is how we're going to learn. I'll do something, you watch me, and then you do something, and we'll critique it. And this is how you're going to learn. So Lou and Otto and Mark and Danny and those guys would come down.
Almost like an apprenticeship.
It was an apprenticeship, and they had served an apprenticeship in real life, but it would go for 6-7 years on the show. Like Dwayne Thorpe said, he was on the show 7 years before they really said anything more than good morning and good night to him. They said he was in the props, in the gags, in cover-ups. He worked with Paul Jung a lot. He was in Paul Jung's contingent of clowns, because the alley was not set up in the same way it was maybe in the later 60s and 70s, where there was a boss clown and a lot of clowns. There was Lou Jacobs had the couple of clowns he worked with. Otto worked with Freddie Freeman in the boxing gag. Paul Jung had his contingent of little people: Prince Paul, Frankie Saluto, Dwayne Thorpe, Dennis Stevens, Freddie Freeman too. So they all worked with kind of like in little satellite groups. And so that was but the Dwayne said, he goes, I was there 7 years before they really even talked to me. By the 7th year, they figured, oh, well, maybe he's going to stick around. We'll give him a chance. So when Clown College started, that opened it up. Now, some of the older clowns that were still on the show in 68, 69 resented that because there was these young people coming in basically going to take their jobs. And, they were at that age of, okay, well, I'm 70 something years old. How long do you want to stay on the road? It's amazing. Paul Wenzel, 88 years old, you're still touring on a circus. I mean, my gosh, that's like unbelievable. But it gave him a reason to be, and he was a talented craftsman, an artist, a clown. I mean, that's all he knew. That's what he did. He was a clown, and it was the kind of a job that you could do until you died. And so there were great older clowns to learn from, and that's something I think eventually Ringling got away from. They wanted more youth. The Clown College really kind of formulated the Ringling style of clown gags, which is it was very big, nonverbal routines, slapstick oriented, short. They did not want 10-minute entrees like you see in Europe with clowns talking and playing musical instruments. They wanted immediate action. They wanted big visuals. They wanted it to go in, get the laugh, get out. You were there to fill while the trapeze net was being put up. They did walk-arounds. They did chases. Clowns were used. They had a very important part of the show, but they weren't like, we're not going to belabor. We're not going to have you out there for 20 minutes doing like some of these European clowns, because at any point the Felds could have just went to Europe and said, there's a lot of clowns here. We could hire them. But they talk and they play music, and maybe that's the American audiences. I think it reflected their taste as the producers of the show, what they wanted to see out there. And Lou worked in that style, and Otto, and of course Otto worked in the seats a lot, but when he did the boxing gag, Lou's gags were usually very sight gag oriented, very visual, very quick, with explosions and midgets and pants getting ripped off and things flying up in the air, and it was instantly recognizable, and like a cartoon. It was like a live action cartoon. So I think, and he being probably one of the key instructors at Clown College, he helped sort of, mold that style. I think that's what became known as the style, the Ringling style. We used to always blow things up at the end. At the end of what's the blow off of the gag? Well, you got to blow something up. Where the midget's going to go in, the fat lady's going to go in the steam box, and the midget's going to come running out. So it's a sight gag. People get it. You don't have to think about it. There's no dialogue. There's no, there's no cliff notes. You have to, there's not a whole lot of. It's like, oh, I get it. The fat lady went in, and the midget comes running out. That's it. We got it, and move on. So I think that was kind of how Ringling started to get formulated in the late 60s, early 70s. And then that continued. I think Frosty Little, who was in the very first Clown College class, but he was a much older man. He was 42 when he went to Clown College. So when he got on the road, very quickly he became the boss clown. And then he sort of, as an older man, compared to some of the 17, 18, 19-year-olds, he was the father figure and sort of set up things. And he built on those traditions that Lou had set up, and Mark Anthony, a lot of these older clowns. So he became part of that. And I think because he would go to Clown College and teach, he would kind of set the tone for that. So when by the time I went to Clown College, Lou was still teaching, and I went to Clown College in 1985. Lou was still teaching 5 days a week. At the age of 83, he would come in every day for 3 hours and teach three 1-hour clowning classes 5 days a week. And Frosty was the head clowning instructor. Lou, of course, was the master clown. And but all the gags we were taught, the old standard routines, the levitation, the washerwoman, the barber shop, the boxing gag, those were taught to us to show us structure. Like, how do you put a clown gag together? And as we developed our own material, you realize, okay, it's got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it needs to move. It needs to have a surprise at the end, or just a blow off. You want to have the introduction of the characters. And they didn't always when they were teaching us clowning, they said, well, we can't teach you character. Your character's got to come into this. We can show you the moves, and here's the hot dog gag, and we're going to do this, or we're going to do the washroom, and then, okay, you're going to come out in a dress. So that's funny right there. Now, that's a laugh. So you're going to get a laugh just showing up. Now you got to be funny. So then what do? Well, all right, you're going to start fighting with this one, and you're going to throw water, and you're going to make it build, and then you're going to start taking the rags and slap each other in the face. And the people are going to, don't rush that, because people like to see that, because you don't ever get to see people slap each other in the face with rags in real life. And then you're going to take the bucket of water, dump it on his head, and then you're going to throw the bucket, and he's going to duck, and the cop is going to come in, and he's going to get a pail of water in his face and chase you out. So that's a very simple gag. It was a very simple structure, but the key was like what you brought to it. So we all learn these gags. I've done it mostly with Karen, but I learned it at Clown College, and Lou taught me the gag at Clown College.
Clown College opened its doors to female applicants, including Karen, who was to become Greg's wife.
Now, there had been female clowns prior to Clown College, but a few. There were Felix Adler's wife, Amelia, Lulu Cranston, Yvette. There was a few others, but most of them they were married to male clowns. That's how they got on the show. But Clown College kind of broke that barrier and allowed females, minorities, everyone that could get in. So Peggy was one of the first to get on the show in 1971. She went to Clown College in 1970, and she was on the road in 71 she started. And a lot of times they would give her drag roles, like she'd be in the dentist gag as the nurse. But they made her wear the big boobs and the over-exaggerated features, because that's what the role traditionally called for, and usually it was cast in a male. But they'd say, well, you want to be the nurse, but this is what the nurse looks like. The nurse has got to have these big boobs and a big butt, and and you can do it. And she did it because it was kind of groundbreaking at the time. I don't think there was a whole lot of other presidents. She eventually moved past that, and then they realized her femininity was great, and they would start designing wardrobe and things for her to feature her.
Tell me about your early experiences. What unit did you go out on, and what was your initial reaction and reception to the clowning on the road?
Well, I joined out. I was offered a contract in 1985 for the Blue Unit. It was a new show. It was the 116th edition. It was the first time they ever had Shanghai acrobats on the show in America. So it was quite a big coup to have these troops from mainland China come out on the show. And we had Wade Burke as the Tiger trainer, and Charlie Bauman was still involved with the show, but as a performance director. Gunther was, of course, on the Red Unit, still performing. Lou had just retired in 1985 from full-time performing. He had only worked a few of the bigger dates, select dates, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, but he was well into his 80s, so they kind of took it easy on him. And after the 1985 season, Lou pretty much retired. We were 28 clowns on the show when I joined. 15 of them were new, so we kind of outnumbered a little bit the older clowns. So it was a fairly big turnover that year for clowns. Again, we had no idea. I knew there was a hierarchy, and I knew there was, we were a first of May, and we were our contract said apprentice clown, so we knew that we were coming in to learn. And there were clowns on the show that were there, Tom and Tammy were there, already about 10 years more. Frosty was still on the show, and Frosty had been there 15, 16 years by then. So it was a lot of people to learn from. A lot of the older clowns, when I called them older, they were probably in their later 20s. I was in my early 20s, but they were, I think everybody got tested a little bit to see if you were going to make this or not. And, it was one thing to be good in Clown College. It's a whole nother thing to be good on the road, because Clown College was all about you, and it was all about clowning, and you were the focus. The circus, you had to figure out, okay, where do I fit in here? And Ringling, the one thing Clown College never taught was how to be an employee. They always said, you're a clown. You got a contract. Now you're going to go work for one of the biggest live entertainment companies in the world. And you're going to be one small peg in this whole big puzzle of acrobats and jugglers and lion tamers and dancers and all these other elements. And you're going to have to live on a train with all these people, and you're going to go to work with these people. And then if you don't get along with them, guess what? You're going to home with these people. So you really had to figure this out. And I think that's where some people were successful. And I mean, there were many, many talented clowns, I remember, that came on the show and it didn't work out for them, because they might have been very talented, but in addition to being talented as a performer, you had to be adaptable and skillful getting along with people. And I think that was sometimes almost more important than your talent was always going to be there. But if you got there and, you know, the circus was either the greatest place in the world to work or the worst place in the world to work. And if you had to decide what that was. And I mean, there were many people that I worked clown-wise over the years that were on the show 1 year and they left. They hated it. And then years later, I see them and they go, "How did you stay there for 10 years? I was there a year and I couldn't wait to get the hell out of there." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you did the same show I did, right?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "I had a great time. You had a miserable time." I don't know. I don't know that answer. Only you know that answer. I know it was a good time for me and I enjoyed it and it was successful and I had a great time. And you were there doing the same thing I was doing and you hated every second of it for whatever reason. Your reasons are as valid as mine. So I used to look at that and just go, well, it's not for everybody. It really isn't. It's, you get with it or get away from it, because it's a lifestyle. It's not a job in the sense of like, I'm going to go to job and I'm going to work from 9 to 5 and I'll work Monday through Friday, have Saturday, Sunday off. The circus was 7 days a week, 50 weeks a year. And you lived, breathed it. You lived on that train. You went with those people. They became your family. And some people don't get along with their family. And it's a hard place to live if you don't get along. So,
how did you feel performing in large arenas, doing your walk around, trying to reach the audience? How did you respond to that? And how do you think audiences were responding to you?
Well, one of the things they taught us at Clown College was they had a class called Arena Choreography, and because we had the Clown College in the Venice Arena where the circus would rehearse and premiere their show. So it wasn't one of the biggest arenas we played by any means, but it was an arena. So many times when we were learning our routines and our material, they would have the class. We'd all go up and sit in the top row. And they'd say, "Okay, we're going to watch you do we're going to do your gag once. We're going to sit in the front. We're going to watch in the front. Okay, now we're going to go up to the top." And chances are most people in the beginning, they perform like this. You're performing to like as though they're still sitting here. You now have to change the way you play it. You have to play up. You have to lift your face up so people can see you far away. So because at the top, you'd see the top of their heads. They go, "We didn't see any of your facial reactions. We missed all that because you weren't playing up to us. Yes, you got to play here, but you got to play all the way up here." And then you play like Madison Square Garden, where it's a quarter of a mile away from the top row to the track. So I think that was a good skill that they did teach us at Clown College, was how to perform in an arena, how to perform in the round. Because you're always in a ring. There were certain routines were done on a track, maybe proscenium. You would play to a section, but most of the time in the big ring gags, we had to play to the whole arena. So they would bust us on this. When we present the material, the Feld or the director would say, you gotta, we never saw your face in the routine. You've got to play to everybody. So you've got to make sure that your actions are big and broad and include the entire arena. So it was definitely a skill that was unique to, I think, Ringling style clowning. And eventually when I left there and went to other shows, on shrine dates, we played a lot of the same buildings that Ringling played. So again, you play big. When I was on Big Apple Circus, which was a one-ring show, I scaled it back because I was so big that they're like, they're right there. They're, the farthest seat's 50 feet. On like a show like Big Apple, whereas Ringling was a quarter of a mile. So you had to adapt your performance style, I think, a little bit.
Did you ever play for a traditional mud show?
Yeah, I played.
Tell me about that.
We played. My wife and I. We after we left Big Apple, we got offered a contract to tour for a season with the Vidbell's Old Time Circus, which was a little show out of upstate New York here, and they played mostly in New Jersey, New York, a little bit of Connecticut, and it was a classic old-time mud show by Al and Joyce Vidbell, who were all Ringling alumni, and Al was an elephant guy from the 50s, and Joyce was a dancer and showgirl and acrobat, and it was a little family show, and it was, you'd play in these little parks and fields, and they'd pitch the tent, and you'd do 2 shows, and they'd unplug your generator on your car. You know, you plugged in and you had to take your makeup off before they unplugged you, and the water you had to fill. And we had a great time on the show. I was much younger. I'm not sure I would be so enamored by that lifestyle now, but it was there was freedom. No one ever said, don't do this or cut your act down. They'd say, go do it. As long as they're laughing, go for it. You know, there was never if they hired you, they figured you knew what you were doing. So as long as they, once you came in and said, well, I'm going to do the washroom and I'm going to do this routine, that routine. Okay, great. Yeah. What's coming in after me? Oh, elephants. Okay, so we'll go chase out on the front track. So the elephants we won't meet them because it's a one-ring show. So things like that were fun. And it was a great learning experience because you play 2 shows a day in little towns and and it's kind of a throwback to the old, how a circus started, so there was grandparents and kids and grandkids and, you could try things and nobody was on your back about it. Whereas shows like Ringling and Big Apple, they kind of set the show. They don't want it to change. But little shows like mud shows like that, you could go out there and, I always say it was a great place to stink. You could try something and go, let's try it. And if it doesn't work, we'll never do it again. But we got to try it. Whereas on a show like Ringling, it was always harder to kind of break in a new bit because then someone would see and go, what are you doing? That's not the way we rehearsed it. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I wanted to try it. And they're like, don't change the show. It's set. But these shows were like, all right, we're going to try it. And sometimes you hit it at the park, and other times you went, well, that just stunk up the place. We're never going to do that again.
At this point in our conversation, Greg was just working up a head of steam. In part 2 of this 3-part series, DeSanto offers insights on how his family figured into his becoming a clown.
I was in an orphanage in Burlington, Vermont, and my parents adopted me when I was 2 weeks old. I am Italian, but I was adopted into an Italian family.
How Clown College introduced him to his life partner.
This girl, this one, keep an eye on her, she's funny. And it was Karen. And I said, oh, okay. So I heard this funny girl, I want to see funny. I like funny.
And how other performers became family.
We laugh about things that happened 30 years ago when we were all young, and our biggest concern was who's going to buy the beer and look at those pretty showgirls. And now it's, you got arthritis too, and when's your colonoscopy?
Whether you're a would-be clown or a veteran performer, you're invited to join in on the continuing adventures of clown Greg DeSanto in the next chapter of Circus Insights. I'm Lane Talbert. See you down the road.